Oh, it's Answers News.
That didn't work well.
I was wondering what you were doing. I didn't realise you went live. Because I said a minute to go for another minute to go. So we're 2 minutes to go. So we've got to fill in 2 minutes now.
We can do that.
All right. So this is Answers News. And this is March
30th. Yep.
And it's Thursday.
That's right.
Yeah, I had a busy weekend in Arkansas. So, wow. Yeah, I'm just...
So that's why we're off.
So, okay. So, Georgia, any interesting news item to start with before we get into what we're doing today for Answers News? Any interesting news item?
Yes. So this one's really funny.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes off the BioLogos forum, which BioLogos is a very, how would you describe it, liberal Christian organization?
Yeah, well, they're out to get churches to teach evolution. And,
right,
yeah.
in millions of years. And so anyways, this isn't from anyone that works at BioLogos, but somebody commented on one of the forums and said, I find someone like Ken Ham easier to understand than a Georgia Purdom. She surely has to know that she is denying the very foundations of science. And then he goes on to say, he or she says, she serves as Ken Ham's Kellyanne Conway. If I'm Kellyanne Conway, guess who you are?
Donald Trump. Okay, so I'm Donald Trump.
It's a compliment to me.
Okay.
Not
hey, you know what? Okay, so... all right, let's get on. We got a huge number of things to do today.
Well, we'll see if we get through all of them. So that's
huge.
Okay.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so I got an interesting news item. I see people are starting to come on now. We are live, and we need people to send emojis, and we need people to put comments, and so people to tell us where they're from, and so we can get going here. So
say what you think about this with emojis. Go ahead, show it.
What's that?
What you're about to show.
Oh, yeah. We want to see if people respond to this one. So what is the total attendance for the Ark so far? You know what? It's hundreds of thousands. Yep. Hundreds of thousands. And we haven't had a full year yet anyway, and we're just coming out of winter. But so we'd already reached 500,000 by fall.
Yeah, I know we're
We opened July 7, missed most of the busy summer and spring. We'd already reached 500,000 by fall.
Right.
And the reason people ask those questions, some of them, is because they think nobody comes.
Well, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about it. Okay, so my interesting piece. All right, so in this area we have an atheist group, or group led by an atheist. They call the Tri-State Free Thinkers, and they don't think a lot. But they actually sponsored the Adopt a Highway signs around the museum, and I understand they're doing it around the Ark too. Basically, they think that that's getting in our supporters' faces and in our faces, and they're supposed to clean up the highway, so I hope they do it. So that's fine. We don't care. But apparently, someone defaced one of their signs, and you can sort of see that there where they defaced one of the signs. Actually, some of our Creation Museum signs have been defaced. Some people have actually shot at them and things like that. We've seen that sort of thing. But here's what they say. While Ken Ham supporters feel the need to deface state property, we'll continue to clean up the highways. So our supporters did that. What evidence do they have?
There's no camera
probably a
out
couple of drunk teenagers one night or something. Who knows?
Could be.
But our supporters. So I challenged them publicly to give me the evidence that our supporters did that.
Yeah.
Of course, there's no evidence, and they can't do that. But you know what was interesting? On their Facebook, when they put that item up and accused our supporters of doing that, and they have absolutely no evidence that that is so. And then this person, one of the people on their Facebook, puts his comment, and the comment is, that guy needs, he uses a couple of expletives we had to leave out, shoving his views down people's neck. You should burn that Ark of his. So, for some people, they're blaming, where we go? There we are. Okay, so they're blaming our supporters for defacing a sign, so their response is, let's burn the Ark down. Yeah, that's
a lot of violence.
Anyway, so let's get on. We see people are joining in. People are starting to put some comments, and people are, I see a lot of sad faces coming across there because it's just ridiculous. Or angry faces, I should say. Yeah, and so it should be. Just ridiculous what the Tri-State Free Thinkers do. So let's get on here. Did you know that the Northern Kentucky Convention and Visitors Bureau just honoured Answers in Genesis because of the Ark and the Creation Museum, and particularly this year the Ark as something new that opened. honoured us with their Star of Tourism Award. This is a
Right.
secular group.
Yeah.
And you have all these different businesses and, all these different tourist facilities. And for Northern Kentucky, they gave us the Star of Tourism Award. And I should have brought that in. I didn't think of it. And they also handed out this flyer. Let me see if I got that in the right place. See that flyer there? That shows how tourism is up in Northern Kentucky. And notice what they put is one of the reasons,
background.
one of the main reasons. See the Ark? See that?
Yeah.
And I say that because there's been an interesting article from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, should I say the Freedom from Christianity Atheist Foundation, because that's really what they are. And they have actually posted a commercial on their website about the Ark. And
They shot it at the Ark.
Yeah, they shot it at the Ark, and it's a commercial for their atheist organisation,
Right.
for people who join that. And they say, as you go through, you've got to stop it about every 3 seconds. You say, lie, lie, lie.
Well, they
lie.
say it's taxpayer funded. We haven't had very many people.
They say the
you
government
know.
gave us the land. We paid like between $6 and $7 million for the
Yeah,
land.
I know. And even then they say, oh, well, the state only estimated we get $325,000 for the first year. We got that like in the first 8 months or less of operation.
Less than 8 months.
Yeah,
oh, yeah.
6 months of
just
operation,
just the
so.
first few months, yeah.
Yeah, and they go on throughout the article to even say, well, I know that this isn't true, the Ark and the flood, because there's not enough water to cover all the mountains, the current day mountains that we have, to 22 feet above the mountaintop. Well,
They need to read the signs.
I know, because the mountains wouldn't have been that high. The mountains
Right.
were formed as a result of the flood, so we wouldn't have had mountains that high, and it just shows they never read anything.
Well, we even talk about marine fossils on the top of the Himalayas.
Right.
Because so how'd those marine fossils get
Right.
there? Obviously, they were uplifted.
They were right. They
right?
were uplifted, and
And-
so it just goes on and on. They
Yeah.
talk about the Ark not being waterproof. Like our Ark isn't waterproof.
Here's
right?
the interesting thing. You know what I find? The Tri-State Freethinkers, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, these atheist groups, they're obsessed with us.
Yeah.
Absolutely obsessed with the museum and the Ark, because they can't stand it
Yeah.
that we're out there and you've got all these people coming, we're influencing millions of people around the world, and they're all upset by it, and so they make up all these lies. And they're trying to make out, in this commercial and in an interview and a podcast that this attorney from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, they did this podcast, and he was saying that, it's all a bust, and he was there and there was no one there. Actually, he was there in the middle of winter.
of February.
Yeah, and during the week. And we have we actually surprisingly had quite a few hundred people there almost every day.
Yeah. Didn't we have like
And-
7,000 last weekend or something?
Yeah,
like that, I
7,000
think? Yeah.
between the Ark and the Creation Museum. Actually, today, looks like we're going to get about 4,000 at the Ark and about 2,000.
I know there's a lot here.
Oh, it's crowded out there. Yeah, I know. And that brings me to another point. We need workers. We need about 300 seasonal employees. We've already employed a few hundred, but we're short 300, 200 at the Ark and 100 at the Creation Museum. So arkencounter.com/jobs and creationmuseum.org/jobs. We need about 100 at the Creation Museum seasonal workers and 200 seasonal workers at the Ark. You can tell
Yeah.
it's not very successful.
No, it's not at all.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why we need all those
And you
people.
can tell it's not successful because the local tourism and conventions visitors bureau
Yeah,
gave us that
gave us an
award.
award.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I tell you, these atheists, they're just obsessed by us because they can't stand the success of what's happening.
Right. Yeah.
So, I thought this was a funny one. And by the way, we have actually tried today on mobiles. The links don't show up, but at least the addresses show up of all the articles to enable you to get the various articles. And if you want to read about the Northern Kentucky Convention and Visitors Bureau and the article about that and about the effect on the Ark on tourism and the tremendous effect it's had, meetnky.com, and that'll be there in their links. Did you know there's a lady that had a very interesting excuse for why she hit a deer?
Yeah. So Fox News reports apparently Bigfoot was the problem.
She was looking in the rear vision mirror and saw Bigfoot, and that's why she hit a deer. It says sheriff officials marked the incident as a vehicle versus deer collision, but did not report any evidence of Bigfoot. Do you believe in Bigfoot, by the way, Georgia?
People have big feet, but not Bigfoot.
Okay.
Apparently Bigfoot was chasing the deer, and so
Oh,
the
okay.
deer apparently got away.
So
because
you
she
don't
hit
believe
it.
you don't believe in Bigfoot. I'm really disappointed. So anyway, so there's somebody here says, "Good job. Don't agree with much of your science, but good job on charity." Oh, that's probably the 3 million. Did you know that through our BBS program, we've now given away 3 million meals to needy children.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Families around the world.
Children's Hunger Fund.
Yeah, the Children's Hunger Fund. They can find out about that on my blog, actually. So, okay, CNN.com, this one, Decoding Jesus. And again, if you want the addresses for all these articles, we're going to post them in the comment there towards the top. So, Decoding Jesus, Separating Man from Myth. Wait, this is something new. There's these people that don't believe Jesus was raised from the dead and don't believe Jesus was a real person.
He lived at all. I mean, it goes further than that. They just believe that he was a myth. And so, but I think what that comes from is, they learn that supposedly the Ark and the flood never occurred and creation isn't true and all of that. So inevitably that's going to lead to not believing any of the New Testament either. I mean, if you don't believe the Old, why believe the New? Too,
if Christ be not raised from the dead, our faith is in vain.
Right.
So,
there's no point
so of course
to
they want to attack the resurrection because, attack a historical Jesus. The interesting thing, one of the things these people say is that there's no reference to Jesus as a real person in Paul's writings.
Yes,
they said the Apostle Paul never referred to a historical Jesus. Now, if you go and read through Romans, in fact,
Romans 5,
you'll find references. In fact, in Paul's writings, there's like over 200 references to Jesus. And Jesus came in the flesh. And when you go and read what they say to that, they say, oh, yeah, but that was all allegory and myth. It was just for teaching. And so there's no reference to Jesus anywhere in Paul's writings.
It doesn't make any Romans 5, 1 Corinthians 15. Just off the top of my head, I mean, I can name those where it talks about that. And they talk about in this article, like, well, the people that don't believe Jesus was a real historical person, how it was somehow related to, there's all these pagan myths of other, gods that supposedly had virgin births and resurrections, and the Jews just borrowed from that in the Bible. But the thing is that, no, it's the other way around. They borrowed from us. And if you look at these pagan gods, when they say resurrection and virgin birth, when you look at the actual story, it's nothing of the sort. It's really something.
It's very similar to the flood legends when they say, oh, look, there are similarities. The Babylonians had flood legends like the Jews. There's other cultures have flood legends like the Jews. The Jews borrowed their stories from the Babylonians. It's the other way around.
Right. And they want to try to say, well, Jesus is a man and we can learn from him and that's a good thing. And I'm thinking, that's not enough. That we can never be good. We can never be perfect like he is. He paid the price so we could receive salvation.
Isn't it interesting when they say there's no reference to Jesus in Paul's writings, yet there's over 200 references, and when you say, oh, but there's reference, oh, yeah, but that's not the real Jesus, that's not a historical Jesus. I mean, these people are basically, what has truth become? I mean, it's just ridiculous. And then they say there's no reference to Jesus in any sources, sources
any credible
outside
historical sources
any
outside
credible,
the Bible.
Historical sources. And then you go and say, well, what about Josephus? What about this one? What about? Oh no, they're not credible.
Yeah.
So
they always make
so in other words, it doesn't matter. They're just not interested
Yeah.
in the evidence. So, okay, this is an interesting one. We found out. Guess what? Guess who created us? Aliens. This is from Express UK. Aliens created our genetic code and signed it with the number 37. Okay, Georgia, Dr. Georgia Purdom, PhD in genetics.
Yeah.
Tell me, is the number 37 there in our genetic code?
No. I mean, you can make any number be there, whatever number you want. You can add things up a certain way that end up being a certain number, and that's exactly what they've done. If you look at the mass of the molecular core shared by all 20 amino acids, that's 74, which is 37 doubled. You can make it say anything you want it to say.
Anyway, it's not 37. It should be 42. Have you ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
No, but I've heard a lot about it.
In the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, this computer, I think it was 7.5 million years, it was trying to find the purpose and meaning of light, and it came up with 42. There it is, 42, the purpose and meaning of life. And nobody ever knows why in the Hitchhiker's Guide why it's 42. But it's 42.
They don't know. But this is not science. And this was actually published in a science journal.
Well, here's the interesting thing to me. The interesting thing is they see something that they think is an ordered pattern or some regular sequence like this, 37, and they immediately think intelligence. And then suddenly it's aliens.
Well, and that's
what about a creator God?
right, because we have no evidence for aliens whatsoever, right? None. And yet they're willing to believe that over willing to believe that we're created by God.
Well, here's the statement towards the end of the article. They have some features that, at least from our point of view, were very hard to ascribe to natural processes.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, there's got to be some intelligence behind this.
Yeah.
Aliens, by the way,
Yeah.
then who made the aliens? Are there
Yeah.
aliens? Who made the aliens? Are there aliens?
Right. Well, it says we think this is the most plausible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they'd be happy to believe in eternal aliens as long as
not
it's not an
science.
eternal God,
Not
because then that means God sets the rules and we're sinners. And okay, this particular article, this took me millions of years to try to read this.
I didn't even read it. I read most of it.
It's from the Atlantic, theatlantic.com. It says, "Welcome to Pleistocene Park in Arctic Siberia. Russian scientists are trying to stave off catastrophic climate change by resurrecting an ice age biome complete with lab-grown woolly mammoths." And as I read through this, they're trying to construct a woolly mammoth. Explain how they're trying to do that for us.
Well, what they're doing, see, we have DNA from woolly mammoths because they can be very well preserved because of where they're found, where it's very cold. And so what they're trying to do is figure out which genes are responsible for those traits in the woolly mammoths. And elephants would have they're part of the elephant kind. So in the elephants, they would have very similar, genetic makeup. And so what they want to do is use gene editing tools to basically take out the elephant genes and put in the mammoth genes that are variants that are specific for mammoth. But then what they want to do is they want to take and they want to grow this in a lab, okay? Not put it in an elephant, but actually grow it in the lab. The problem is no one's ever done that with a mammal, ever.
So can they actually get, are those genes intact from the mammoths?
So they can probably read some of the genetic material.
So it's
now,
still
it's
there?
not perfect, but they can read the genetic material.
So it can't
probably.
be probably as old as what they claim it is then.
No, there's no way.
Because it would
it's not
deteriorate,
tens of
wouldn't it?
thousands of years old.
It can't
because,
be.
yeah, it's got to be a lot younger than that.
But
yeah.
but if you wanted to reconstruct a woolly mammoth, haven't they done this with one particular breed of horse that they thought was lost, and then they were able to breed this one with
There
that one
is-
and this one with
I
this
can't think
one,
of the name of it,
and they
but
sort of
they're trying
reconstructed
to-
it from the genes.
They're trying to do that, but it will never be a perfect one of that
Right.
because it's
You
still
wouldn't ha-
degraded. It's still not, and you're dealing with genes that are from. It's a mixture of genes. It's
Right.
not just fully from that organism.
But the whole point is you've got to work with information that's already there.
it's not evolution.
It's not evolution.
And they're trying to do this, and it all goes back to climate change, believe it or not.
Yeah, because
So it's all about, we have to reconstruct this because if the permafrost thaws, all these gases will be released and there'll be a catastrophic end of the Earth.
well, the other
that's
thing they admit in here is that climate change can happen quickly because of gases released into the earth
Right,
and things
yeah,
like
exactly.
that.
But
Naturally, not by man. Anyway,
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Kind of interesting.
Okay, Time magazine, the latest issue. Here is the front cover, right there. Is truth dead? Is truth dead? So, you know what? I must admit, you know how they talk about fake news these days and so on.
Yeah.
Really, we're getting to the stage where how does anyone know what is right and what is wrong and what is true and what is a lie?
Well, because they don't have any foundation for determining that. When you go away from God's word, it's just what every person thinks, and so you can believe whatever you want.
And it's interesting. One of the articles in Time magazine that I have here, the latest issue, it's about this author who wrote a book. He says, what did your reinvestigation of their creation reveal to you about gender? Talking about Adam and Eve. Genesis introduces the idea of gender fluidity. God creates this ungendered human in God's image. That suggests that the first creation has male and female inside them. Look, this whole thing about gender is it's so far out of control.
It is. It's ridiculous.
It is.
I mean,
And
that's the only thing I know to call it.
well, in NBC News, they had this article, Judge grants Oregon resident the right to be genderless.
Yeah. So neither male nor female.
So this person said he didn't believe he was male or female. But while you hear this doesn't get complicated. Okay, so this is what it says in the article. Agender is defined as the absence of gender, not to be confused with transgender or genderqueer. Agender people typically describe feeling that they have no gender identity whatsoever. And then it says a handful of organizations serving transgender, gender non-conforming and intersex people talks about that they haven't been granted a legally genderless status before. What? I didn't even know what intersex people.
Well, and what they're trying to
What
do
is that?
is they're trying to separate biological sex from gender. from gender identity. They're trying to separate those two, but there's no place for that. I mean, it's God made us male or female. I mean, and he creates us in his image. So you can't just, I mean, your sex determines your gender and vice versa. I mean, it's not some fluidity that you get to choose.
Now, it is true that because of sin, some can have some physiological problems.
Because of the fall,
because of the fall. But that's the exception, right?
But those are exceptions, not the rule,
very
certainly.
small.
And that's not what we're talking about here, either.
Well, they go on here, and agender doesn't necessarily mean a complete lack of gender. And so it's about some neutroi, I don't even know what that word is.
I don't even know what that word is.
Do feel completely genderless. That is, they have no gender, an absence of gender, or a null gendered. Now there's another one. Others have an internal gender that is neither male nor female, just neutral. Agender is a term used interchangeably for both. I'm confused. Okay, I'm really confused.
Well,
and other groups like the Intersex and Genderqueer Recognition Project. Have you ever heard of that?
I don't even know what that means.
IGRP. Okay. In California, were formed to fight more options for people who do not fit traditional definitions of male and female out of the dozen or so people who have legally changed their genders to non-binary. Do you know what non-binary is?
It's like a whole other language. And I've noticed even too now when they say like LGBTQ, which used to be what it would say. Now it's LGBTQIA. Because I is for intersex and A is for asexual.
And did you know countries including Australia, Canada and India have third gender options on varying documents from birth certificates to passports? Well, can you imagine what's going to be like in the future? Gender. Are you male, female, non-female, non-male, agender, non-binary, intersex? I mean, you take all these different things. I mean, see what happens when you abandon God's word.
Well, so we need to pray for these people because obviously they're very confused. And they need the Lord. I mean, they really, really do.
Hey, Georgia, there's a question here I thought would be good for you to answer. Why is Neanderthal DNA a little different than our DNA if they are humans?
Well, it's just like these people probably were a very isolated people group years ago, and so because of that, they have variations that we still see in some people today, but they're still different enough. The same is true of Denisovan DNA, which is another sort of people group. Those individuals aren't around any longer, but they're fully human. They just have some variations that we don't see
and possibly
today.
After the Tower of Babel, they became isolated from
other
groups.
They became isolated probably, and that's why maybe they have those variations that nobody else has, and so... Yeah.
It's interesting, though, this person asked, what percentage of DNA is different between the different ethnic groups? It's interesting. I have a quote that I use in my talk dealing with the one race, that they're now saying there's more variation within each group than there are between the groups.
True.
More
that's
genetic
true.
variability.
Yeah, and it's really only about 0.1% difference between any two humans, regardless of their ethnicity.
Is that all?
0.1%.
Wow, that's interesting.
Very low.
There's people watching from all over the world. I can see that here. Okay. Someone said 42 makes sense to them. Or should we change it to 37? Maybe the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy needs to be rewritten. We've got a lot of comments on here. Okay. Well, now I'm totally confused over the gender thing. I don't know what words to use anymore.
Well, they are too.
All right. So this is Daily Telegraph from Australia.
Right.
Okay. From Australia, a columnist. Is that a pronunciation?
I don't know. You say it. You're Australian.
Okay. This columnist said it should be illegal to be a stay-at-home mum. And she goes on to talk about the fact that feminism is not about choice, it's about equality. Of course, except when it comes to abortion, it's about choice.
Yeah.
Right?
But she basically, what she's trying to say is that women who have children should have to work outside the home. They should have to be legally employed.
In other words, she wants to tell every woman what they should do. That they shouldn't have any choice.
Even though they can have a choice whether or not to have children, if they do choose to have children, they have to work outside the home.
So she wants to make it illegal to work outside.
Well, that's what it sounds like.
To be a stay-at-home mum, she wants to make it illegal.
To help Australia's economy. But the thing that got me with this article, and I mean, I'm a working mom, but I totally respect women's rights to choose whether they work outside the home or choose not to do that. But what I got from the article was all about, this equality. Well, if women work outside the home, there's going to be more equality all over. This is a good thing. And the thing is, though, she's looking at equality from a secular standpoint. And equality in the world's view is all about sameness, that women and men are the same. And we don't want that. That's not God's design. God's design is that, yes, we're both image bearers. Right. Yes, we're both one in Christ if we know Christ as our Savior. But we have different functions and different roles. And so we shouldn't want to be achieving equality in the world's eyes, but equality in God's eyes.
And, Scripture says we're to submit to each other as husband
Right.
and wife in the roles that God has ordained.
in the roles that God has given us.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go on to this one, cgtn.com. And this is news.cgtn.com. Again, we're putting the addresses in there in one of the comments for you. Unparalleled number of dinosaur tracks found in Australia.
It's all about Australia today.
It's all about Australia today. Yeah, we've got this woman who writes that it should be illegal for women to, be stay-at-home mums. Yeah. And now we've got one of the best, apparently unparalleled, must be the best number of dinosaur tracks found in Australia. Here's the interesting statement I thought in here, though. It's extremely significant, forming the primary record of non-avian dinosaurs. Tell me what that means.
Well, it's just the ones that didn't become birds.
Oh, the ones that didn't become birds.
Yeah, the ones that didn't.
But you know what's interesting? They talk about the Australian Aborigines, and apparently the Australian Aborigines had found this particular area, and they knew about it.
Well, they knew about it, and they didn't want it destroyed because they were going to do that.
But they talk about the Dreamtime legends of the Australian Aborigines, and you know what they don't tell you in this article? I know some of the Dreamtime legends because there was a series of books that used to be for sale, I know, in the museum in Brisbane. I don't know whether they still are, on Aboriginal myths and legends. I actually have a set of them here that I put in our library here at Answers in Genesis. And it has stories about a forbidden tree and how the woman took some sweet honey from the tree and released the evil bat into the world, and now there's death. How the Creator God had said not to touch his tree. Yeah. They have stories about 3 sons on a boat. And a flood.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And there was a rainbow put in the sky at the end of the flood. Stories even about a time when there was sort of one language. There's stories about woman made while man was asleep. And they have woman made from a yucca tree.
Yeah, but still, they're borrowing from.
But again, it's because we would say the account of creation and the flood's been handed down through the Tower of Babel, and as people have moved out over the earth, they've changed them, but there are elements that are there, which is why we have a Flood Legends exhibit right there at the Ark.
At the Ark, yeah.
And on the second deck, and it's no, that's on the third deck. Yeah, on the third deck. Yeah, there's so many exhibits in the Ark.
I can't keep track.
So, okay, let's see. We've got people from all over who are talking Australia. So somebody is talking about Australia. I don't think they're quite on side necessarily with us, but that's fine. I'm coming to Australia actually in November. So anyway.
Okay, from the New York Times. Who killed the Iceman? Clues emerge in a very cold case. So this is about Otzi, who is he's been around for a long time. He's one of the he's the world's most perfectly preserved mummy. So he was found between the northern Italian border with Austria in 1991. So but his body, as the ice thawed, they found it. And so then they basically kind of set a forensic scientist on this to figure out how he died. And so that's what the article is about, basically. And, of course, the time frames are all wrong on this. They've got him.
Well, the interesting thing how it goes through this whole story, how he went to this village and he had a meal and he had a fight with someone and he killed him. And that's because he's got this wound that they think
he's got a
is
wound on his hand that's really deep.
And then he went away, and then he was sitting by himself, and then he was cooking a meal, and somebody came up behind him, and from 100
feet away, I think,
they're able to get this arrow. And you know what's interesting? They find murder victims today, and they can't even figure out what happened. But we know what happened back
from 5,000 years ago. They know what happened.
It's just like the weather. They can't even predict the weather from one day to the next. I just noticed we might have tornado warnings tonight. They didn't say that yesterday, but they know what happened millions of years ago.
Well, no, they said at the very end, it just shows there hasn't been much evolution after all, because people were killing each other. Well, it's not evolution,
and people, and they look like the same people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's not evolution. Let's not change.
So we have someone here from Delaware, and come to Perth, then I'll be on side. This person says, "Oh, okay, all right." So this one, religious-based creationism. This might have to be the last one.
This will be the last
We've got a lot of others here.
Well, we'll just do them
We'll do them
Monday.
Monday. Okay. All right. So religion-based creationism, debasement of science, and they go through. Creationists have laid claim to some of the most intriguingly deceptive arguments against evolution. It's interesting. This person goes through and says, just because, like when you see a Boeing 747, you look at it and say somebody had to design it. They say, no, God's not behind design. Natural selection is.
Yeah. Well, okay, and that's the problem. First of all, design is only a small part of the argument for creation. We also deal with astronomy and geology and other areas, but. Yeah, they say, well, because we see design, we say God, and they say, well, we see design and we say natural selection. And I'm like, natural selection doesn't design anything. All it does is selects from what's there.
It selects on the incredible information and the code system that's already there.
Right.
It can't make new information.
No.
It only selects on what's there.
No.
And that DNA is already there. And you know what? They go through this and they say, see, you've got to believe in evolution. They give all this evidence for evolution. There's one thing in here that they give, and that is humans are born with a tail sometimes.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was like, no, they're not. I mean, those are not tails in the sense of tails in other organisms.
Isn't it a fatty tumor that they're born with that they're talking about?
I don't
sometimes
remember exactly
there's a fatty
what
tumor.
it is, but it's not a tail, not in the sense of animals that have tails. That's been known
Says the
for a
fish-like
long
tail
time.
usually disappears in embryonic state. Fish-like tail? That's because they believe in evolution.
Yeah, it's not a tail.
That old
That's
idea
really
of embryonic
old.
recapitulation.
Yeah,
Remember that?
yeah. And they all. But what's interesting though, they talk about how it's really about different amounts of evidence, and I'm like, it's not about the amount of evidence because we're all looking at the same evidence. The difference is our interpretation of that evidence based on our worldview.
Well,
so
sometimes maybe I can't figure out what they mean by the tail here. Maybe they're talking about the coccyx, which is very necessary
which
for
is
muscle
necessary.
attachment.
Muscles are attached to that,
and it's not a tail.
No, it's not a tail.
If you want to find out how important it is, go and fall on your coccyx and see what happens.
Yeah, you need it.
Okay, so we better end off this.
Okay.
Dr. Purdom and I, and Bodie will be back with us on Monday,
right,
too.
and I do want to mention, too, our Answers for Women conference is next week, April 7th and 8th, so it's still not too late to register. We'd love to have you come out for that. You can go to answersforwomen.org for more information on that, and I encourage you to do that.
And we're looking for 300 seasonal workers. We've already employed a lot. I think we've employed 300 to 400 already, but we want 200 more at the Ark, 100 more at the Creation Museum. ArkEncounter.com/jobs, creationmuseum.org/jobs. And again, for those people from Australia, I'll be doing a whole full-day conference in November, and it's reengage.org.au for the website there. We'll be back Monday and finish off these and have a lot of new items as well.
Yeah.
There's so much in the news we could talk about. And I mean, we could
it's hard to be discerning.
We could spend
on this.
hours probably about each one of these articles, but we just want to
Yeah.
give you a brief overview and just have informal time together. That's what we've done. So we're signing off today.
See you Monday.